When our museum arranged an interview with Freddy Fletcher, we were interested in his history as well as Arlyn Studios. In the process, we were intrigued by the history of the building that Arlyn Studios presently occupies. In the 1920s, the area included the Austin Military Academy, thus the name of Academy Drive. In the early 1950s, architects Winifred O. Gustafson and Emil Niggli designed the Terrace Motor Hotel. The Terrace Motor Hotel, which included 2 restaurants, later became the Austin Convention Center. Freddy's mum, Bobbie, played piano in one of the restaurants. In the middle 1960s, she also performed around Austin, including the Lakeway Inn, and in the early 1970s, she played at the Stephen F. Austin Hotel and Polonaise restaurant. When Willie moved from Nashville to Austin, he lived in the Motel, now the Terrace Apartments, directly west of the building. In 1977, the Terrace was purchased by Tim O'Connor and Willie Nelson and renamed the Austin Opry House. The property included a 14-acre, 17-building entertainment compound. 200 Academy Drive provided the Austin Opry House with 56,000 square feet in the main building. It also had 218 apartments in 17 different buildings, stretching from the corner of the Traverse Heights neighborhood to South Congress. The Opera House opened in July 1977, featuring Waylon Jennings. Films like Honeysuckle Rose and The Songwriter were filmed there, along with Ray Charles and Willie Nelson's HBO special. Wayne Gathwright's original Music Lane recording studio was located in the facility in 1980. The control room used to be a meat locker and had 13 inches of cork insulation behind cinder block walls. During the early 80s, bands like Asleep at the Wheel maintained their offices on site in one of the apartments. In 1984, at his uncle's recommendation, Freddy Fletcher founded Arlyn Studios in a portion of the Austin Opry House. In 1988, Willie Nelson sold his interest in the Austin Opry House to Tim O'Connor and Morris Leader of Entertainment Complex Inc. 1989 had several significant events. Freddy and Lisa were married in September, but sadly, Freddy lost both brothers in that same year. In 1990, O'Connor had to sell the Opry House at a fire sale price. Arlyn Studios remained at the same location. In June 1990, Austin Community College began negotiating for lease space from Freddy Fletcher at the Austin Opry House for the college's commercial music program. In 2012, Freddy decided to reclaim the space. With his wife Lisa, plus 2 partners, Will Bridges and T. Murphy, they gutted the old studio and created a state-of-the-art facility. The studio's past client roster is long and impressive, including Bonnie Raitt, Frank Sinatra, Indigo Girls, Sublime, Neil Young, Stevie Ray Vaughn, Willie Nelson, and many, many more. While they hope the revamped studio continues to attract big names, it will also provide options to artists with more limited resources. Arlyn Studios recently hosted the Terrace producers and engineers, as well as other South by Southwest events.
I'm Martin Theophilus with the Museum of Magnetic Sound Recording with Freddy Fletcher of Arlyn Studio and a lot of other things. And Freddy's been kind enough to give us a little bit of time today to talk about his history. So I would guess maybe starting at the beginning, which is when you first decided to do drumming. Is that too far back?
No. My first instrument was a clarinet, and but I started playing drums in the 5th grade. I was interested in drums, and so that was really the beginning. And you know, I started with the school band, and then I bought a set of drums.
Where was this?
This was in Clifton, Texas.
Okay.
And I lived there when I was in the 5th and 6th grade for a short time, and with my grandparents. And when I came back to Austin in the 7th grade, I'd already gotten a set of drums, and I started working with my mother. She would, it was really interesting, she would play piano with one hand, the organ on another, and played bass with her feet, and I played drums. And we did a lot of old, like Glenn Miller stuff and a lot of classic stuff, and I learned how to play brushes and that style of music for what she was doing, because I always wanted to be a rock and roll drummer or a jazz drummer, but it was really good training for me. And from there I just started, you know, playing professionally, and I still play, but I kind of quit the road and that stuff in 1984 when I built the studio here.
When your mother was playing here, she was playing, was she up playing other gigs, or when did she and your uncle get started?
Well, they started off together, but you know, my mom was a single mom that had 3 kids, so she really couldn't travel for a long time. And I think she went back to work with Willie in 1971 or 72.
Wow.
And, you know, because we were all grown and, you know, getting out of high school, moving on, and so it was a good opportunity for her to go back and play with Willie, and they've been doing it ever since.
Wow.
But they grew up playing together.
Right.
They played in the church in Abbott, Texas. My great-grandmother was a music teacher. And Mom played piano in the church. And Willie followed, and then, you know, they ran into my father, who was more of a promoter than a drummer, but he put together their first band that played outside the church called Bud Fletcher and the Texans. It was really Willie and Mom's and first band, you know, and his mom had kids and Willie moved on with his career. They didn't play together until 1972 when they all came back together, 71, 72 in there somewhere.
Wow. And that was your dad that you named Arlyn after,
yeah.
I understand.
Uh-huh.
That's cool.
Yeah, everybody called him Bud, but his name was Arlyn. I always thought that was a cool name.
Yes.
And I kind of named this as tribute to him.
Yeah, that's great. Your mother and uncle keep going like they do. That's
Oh, it's crazy. You know, they keep talking like, well, we're not going to do that many, all those dates, you know, but they say that every year, and nothing really changes. They're still going.
When you first started doing drumming, what do you remember as the first time you were recorded, and do you remember what you were recorded with?
That's a good question. You mean as like in a studio?
More just on your own, or if your mother had a recorder that...
No, we didn't have any of that. I mean, the first real studio experience I had, I was probably in the 11th grade, and it was in San Antonio. It was the first real studio I'd ever been in, and was with a guy named B. Spears, who was Willie's original bass player, and a guy named David Zettner, who is a very talented guy. And I can't remember the artist, but it was my first experience being hired as a drummer to play in a studio, you know, and having to go in and learn the music that day and that kind of thing. And it intrigued me because I liked the process and the discipline you kind of had to have as opposed to playing live, you know, because basically it's a tattoo. People are going to hear it forever, and so it's more of a discipline to me, and that's when I really got intrigued, and I like the studio stuff, you know.
Right. Did you then, when did you first do a first engineering kind of session?
I'm not really an engineer, I'm more of a producer. I think it's hard to do both because you can't focus, if you're focusing on the technical part of engineering, then you're not really focusing on the musical and creative part. So I'm not really what I would consider an engineer by any stretch of the imagination. I know good equipment and I know how I want it to sound and things like that, but I kind of leave that up to people that are more technical about the operations of that.
Okay. So the first, when you then moved to your own studio, it was Arlyn? It was here?
No, it wasn't here. It was interesting. This building has a lot of history to me. My mom played piano where one of our big cutting rooms is in there now, we call the living room, in 1966. This whole building was the Austin Convention Center. And this was a place called the Summer House Restaurant. And she played piano in there. Then fast forward in the 70s, Willie bought the whole property and turned it to the Austin Opry House. At that point I was living in Nashville, and I was back and forth periodically and traveling a lot, and I came down here in 1984, it was during Christmas, was 83 actually, and I was working, I was producing a record on a girl, and was using a studio here in town, and Willie said, well, why don't you build a studio here at the Opera House? And something I totally hadn't thought about, and so here I am however many years later, and it's just been a really good experience. I'm very proud of it. I think it's been it's good for all of us, a lot of the musicians in town, and it brings people into town, and there's been a lot of great music recorded in here. How did you set up the first studio? I mean, did you bring in an engineer to choose the different equipment? It's interesting, the studio I was working at in Austin was going bankrupt. Oh. And I ended up buying that equipment out of that studio to initially get started here. What year was that? That would have been 83. Okay, right. And then my next step was to design the room, and I hired a really good studio designer from Nashville at the time, and he did the initial design. And then, you know, I bought really good equipment to start with, and then from there on, I mean, I just kept buying. You know, I don't think I've ever sold a piece of equipment. So I saw the old Scully's and others. Yeah, yeah. So you know, as time progressed, I mean, you know, you change things out, but I'm pretty much an old school analog guy. I've got a lot of tube gear, a lot of tube microphones, and I mean, I got some of the new stuff too, but I haven't found anything that actually can compare to like the tube consoles I put together. I mean, I've never heard anything that sounds like that. When did you leave this area and go to Pedernales? Didn't you move everything out to Pedernales? Or? That's an interesting story. So, yeah, I know. So I had Arlyn, it was up and running, and Willie had the Pedernales, and then Willie had his IRS problems. And he came to me again and said, would you put the Pedernales back together and reopen it? And I'm going like, I need another studio, like I need a hole in my head. But, you know, when Willie asks you to do something, you do it. And so at that time, I had a school that was booking me out of here a lot, and they were training students and training audio engineers and stuff. So it kind of made sense, and so I went and put the Pedernales together. I left some gear here and some gear I didn't, and yeah, I ran that till, what, 2 years ago, and Willie wanted to take it back private, and so that's when I decided to come back. And school was here for a long time, and I don't know if you knew, Chris and I actually started that school. Oh, really? There was a Mix magazine in '86 or '87 that listed all the recording schools around the country. Austin had nothing. Right. You know, I'm really happy to be back in this space. It's got a lot of history to me, and it's you know, it's kind of my baby. It really, you know, it's the only studio I've ever been able to build and design. Yourself? Right. Yeah, and you know, it's just been really, there's been so much good music here that you feel it when you walk in. Right, yeah. Everybody that was there the other day was just complimenting. And you've got a great support system in Lisa. Oh, she's great. I mean, you know, without her, I don't think I could do it. I mean, she does all the heavy lifting. She runs the place, she manages it, she books it. You know, I kind of just float in, and, you know, she takes care of all the stuff. Freddy says that you did all the heavy lifting, so we were curious what heavy lifting entails.
Oh, well, I love that he said that. That was nice. I'm here day to day, pretty much all day, every day with my amazing team. Freddy's here, obviously built this place and is the studio, but he's the guy we go to for the big stuff. The day-to-day stuff is sort of not his forte, and I love it. I mean, I'm so thrilled that he built this place, because it's like our other child. And so I think by heavy lifting he means I sort of live and breathe this studio, and I'm thrilled to be able to do so, because it's rewarding, it's rich, it's the people that come in and out of here are amazing, and the people that I work with, Jacob and Joseph and Whitney and Christopher, are really the ones actually I would say they probably do the heavy lifting. Jacob and Joseph are our engineers. Jacob's our chief engineer, and Joseph's been with us for years, and they're here. They literally really are here overnight most nights. They work all these different hours depending on what the client wants. So my team does the heavy lifting, and I'm just happy to be a part of it. I'm here all the time, and that's what he means.
That's cool. That's one of the premises for our whole museum, is that people don't think about the engineers that get up at 4 in the morning and kind of tweak a studio.
Exactly, and they, particularly these two guys, and most particularly Jacob. Jacob's been with me. He started interning for me when he was 17, and he's now 31. And you know, they get paid by the clients, and they love what they do, but they take such an ownership in this place. They're here long after that client's gone, tweaking things and fixing things, and they love it like it's their own. Right. So I'm thrilled that y'all are focusing on that.
Okay. And Freddy lets you out some of the time.
Not very often. No, I'm kidding. So, I definitely get out.
So were you, are you a performer, or how did you connect with Freddy? I
am not a performer, and I wish I'm passionate about music. I always have been. But I actually married into this, you know, dream job. I met Freddy. I actually am from Mississippi originally, and I met Freddy. I was a flight attendant for Southwest Airlines at the time, and I was going to do that job for 2 years, but it was such a great company to work for. I ended up keeping it until we had our daughter, actually. But I was giving away trips and started working here early on, just a couple years after Freddy built it. His manager at the time had to leave, so I kind of took over. But before that, I was managing out at Arlyn Studios. I was telling you that we worked with both. So so I kind of married into it, but have always been passionate about it. I cannot perform, I cannot work this board, but it's in my blood, and I do the booking and the scheduling and work with our team, and you know, I love it. Right. So
you're doing not just the recording, but you have other groups like the Grammys or Gripe.
Mm-hmm. Since we've sort of reopened Arlyn in the last fully about a year and a half ago, that's sort of a thing that we sort of fell into. We've never really done hosted events out of here, and first and foremost, we are a recording studio, and will always remain that way. But it's such a cool, different angle to do these really neat events that we're doing. And again, we're not going to ever turn into an event facility, right. but things that are music related or arts related or support, you know, our local Ham and Sims and the Grammys, and it's a special thing to us to be a part of all that. So it is more management and a lot more work from my team that I've been talking about, but such fun work. I mean, I feel like we're socializing, you know.
Right. Thank you so much. This has been
Thank
great.
y'all. I can't thank you enough.
So then you thought you'd create another studio, which is ACL Live.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Taking on more things.
Yeah, that to me was Bo Armstrong and our are good friends, and he's in the real estate business, and we talked about that for quite a while, and he was kind of intrigued with it, and you know, they ended up buying the property over there. So that took 6 years to do. A lot of work. That's a great facility.
I'd read that you'd conceived of it though quite some time ago. Was that the 6 years ago?
The idea really came from, you know, the Opry House here when we had it, because I was wired into all the stages and I had video tie lines, but it just wasn't like, that's a real TV studio over there now, and this was kind of, audio was easy. If we wanted to do video, we'd bring in video stuff and just run it back here, but that was kind of where the idea of, you know, this can be done, and you know, now as media's gotten to be so important, and you know, there's so much ways to distribute it. It's you know, it just made sense.
You've already started doing the TV show here.
Yes.
With him and with Dan Rather.
Dan Rather came for when Willie and Merle did their taping.
Okay.
And Yeah, I'm real excited about that. That's fun.
Yeah.
It's cool.
I saw a story that you're kayaking on the Colorado. Anything about that?
No, I mean, I bought a place outside of Bastrop on the Colorado. It's very peaceful and quiet. I love it. It's kind of my therapy and a little hideout. And, you know, sometimes you got to have some quiet time because you know how that goes.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you guys for doing it.
As our museum completed this interview, we realized we were dealing with a moving target. Lisa and Freddy and the folks around them are constantly on the move and creating new opportunities for musicians. This interview was only a moment in time. We sincerely appreciate Lisa and Freddy's participation as well as all the contributors.